Hi there, everyone. Welcome to uh, this Real Talk. I'm really excited to kind of be back on schedule. We had a little bit of travel, and here we are, ready for another Real Talk. It is April. It's Autism Acceptance Month, and I could not think of a better Real Talk than to have someone who is supporting a loved one on the spectrum to come and share a little bit about their experiences. I was connected to today's guest, Ray, through a dear friend and former colleague, and so excited that you're able to join us today. Hello, Ray.
Hello, Nicole. I'm really excited to be here with you as well. I'm looking forward to our real talk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Um, so yeah, like I said, it's April. We're at the tail end here. And it's Autism Acceptance Month. And one of the things that I wanted to bring to the group is that oftentimes when we think about caregiving, maybe the first picture that pops up in our mind is, caring for an older loved one. And there's so much complexity of caregiving scenarios across the lifespan. And so I wanted to invite you to kind of talk about yourself and your experiences of supporting your son. So I don't know if you want to kick things off and just share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and a little bit about your caregiving uh, scenario, as it were.
Sure. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate that, especially during Autism Acceptance Month. My name is Ray Hemachandra. I'm from New York. Then 4 years born and raised, then 4 years in DC, 6 years in Chicago, 12 years in Bellingham, Washington, and the past 20 in Asheville, North Carolina. My son, Nicholas, was born toward the end of those years in Bellingham. He was born in 2000, so he's 25 now. He was diagnosed as autistic. He was pre-diagnosed by the school system in 2003 and received a formal diagnosis of autism from the University of Washington's Autism Center in 2004. And we moved here to Asheville in 2006 to North Carolina because at the time, autism services were better here than they were in Washington State. And so we did kind of a nationwide search as my son was approaching kindergarten. So my son Nicholas, he's 25, he's autistic, he's intellectually disabled. He has co-diagnoses of obsessive compulsive disorder, tic disorder, anxiety disorder, and mixed expressive receptive communication disorder. He's also medically fragile. He had a stroke in 2014 that resulted in some cognitive regression and some asymmetry in his face still when he gets tired, and that was a dozen years ago. And in 2016, he had the onset of ulcerative pancreatitis, which they had a remarkably difficult time diagnosing. He lost 30 pounds. He was ambulanced from one hospital to another. If he hadn't responded to a treatment the second time, he was getting it for the second time, which was a Remicade infusion. They would have taken out his colon the next day. So that overlay of medical fragility also is present in addition to the autism and the intellectual disability. Just to finish up, my son, he graduated high school with a diploma. He was in special education, of course. He did a 1 year program called Project Search after graduation. There are project searches all around the country, and which gave him some vocational skills. He works one evening a week at an ice cream shop. He volunteers at a food bank and another organization that does community service. And he has a Medicaid waiver, which in North Carolina is called an innovations waiver. So he support workers during the week. He also gets SSI, so he gets Social Security because of his disability.
Gotcha. Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned, I think, the comorbidity piece, because I think that that's something that's really, really important. That's not something that we necessarily think of when we're on the journey of caregiving, is that oftentimes we're not dealing with just one diagnosis. There's a lot of complexities that can be kind of layered in there, especially throughout that lifespan. So So I really appreciate you bringing that to the forefront. And I think it just shows how varied everyone's care experience can be.
And for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, autism specifically, but other intellectual and developmental disabilities as well, uh, physical disability is not unusual, or medical complications are not unusual. They're more common than in the general population.
Yeah, this is very true. As I've shared, I think here in the group, I'm someone that was born with a developmental disability. And so definitely understanding the physical implications of that. So yeah, that's a really great point to bring up. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because we've talked here in the group a lot about this idea of self-identification as a caregiver. I like to say, claiming the name and claiming that title of caregiver. Um, a lot of people struggle with the term caregiver. As someone that was born with a developmental disability, my mom has never called herself my caregiver. Now that I work for Caregiver Action Network, it's become a little bit more part of her vernacular. And she is my long distance caregiver. I'm her long distance caregiver. It's she always likes to tell me that she did it first. So how do you feel about that term, caregiver?
Um, Caregiving is a relationship. There's a reciprocity to it. That's whether you're caring for a 25-year-old person who's autistic and has intellectual disabilities, but it's equally true for elder care or for someone with a significant medical condition or for a baby. You're getting something back. You're always getting something back. So the caregiving is mutual. For my son, it's very conscious. He's aware of it. My son and I, he's 25 years old. His mother, it's been him and me since 2011. His mother returned to other family, her daughters and her grandchildren on the West Coast. So it's been him and me for 15 years here and for 25 years. And believe me, as I've aged, Nicholas cares for me as much as I care for him. He gives me as much love and as much joy as I try to give to him. So I always respect the reciprocity of that dynamic and relationship. And one thing about being a caregiver is that it becomes part of our identity, but it doesn't subsume the identity of the other person. They are still their own person, and that's something always to be mindful about. Because very quickly, when you have that level of intimacy and care and constancy, very quickly you begin to think of your well-being as the other person's well-being. They're kind of joined, they're connected. But we have to be really careful not to strip away their agency there. So we're asking questions and respecting preferences, even when we think we know them. I always ask my son, I usually give him choices, this or this or this. And not infrequently, maybe as much as weekly, he gives a response that I would not have anticipated. And if I was just making the choice for him, I would not have gotten it right. So that's a very specific example of what I'm speaking about more generally, that doing everything we can, even for elder care, when there are dementia issues, but still respecting the agency and the choice in the moment, right? And for my son who is autistic and intellectually disabled, still recognizing that he gets to make choices for his life because it's his life, not mine, even though we share it together.
I love that so much. I love, 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 love the connection to that um, dynamic relationship. And also, we've talked a lot about the fact that as a caregiver, you can lose yourself in that role of caregiving, but you're not just a caregiver. That is a fragment of your relationship that you have with the person that you're supporting. You're always going to be friend, neighbor, parent, child, whatever that other relationship or relationships may be, spouse. Um, and so I really love that um, hit on that because that's obviously something that we talk a lot about here at CAN is, you know, uh, not just the aspect of identity, but also, shared decision making. You're a care team with your loved one. You're making decisions with them. You are their advocate. You are the person that is putting a megaphone to their wishes, and really being that structure that's there to support, and make sure that everyone is on that same page. It's going to look very different across any kind of caregiving scenario, but I think at its crux, that's what it comes down to. So I really appreciate you saying that.
And Nicole, I'll just add that for me, it's less making decisions together, although that happens. And I do make decisions for him. I do.
Yeah.
But whenever possible, I'm supporting him in his decision making. I'm honoring and respecting those choices. I try not to give him choices that are not achievable. That is, that if he makes this choice, I can't give it to him. I want to have choices that are realistic. And the reality of his life and my life, we all, everyone, disabled or not, has reality constraints of where we are in life and what's possible. But within that, like, I'll give you an example. Nicholas has, since he was a young boy, he wants to be a car driver. What do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be a car driver. And so, when his peers started driving cars and when then their younger siblings started driving cars, this was a difficulty for him. And Nicholas will never be able, I can't say never. I think it's highly unlikely Nicholas will be able to drive a car in public on public streets. He'll be able to physically do it. If all the other cars were driven by Google, he probably could do it just fine. But he can't anticipate what other drivers are going to do, which is called a theory of mind or executive functioning deficit
Mm-hmm.
that's common to autism. If he's in an accident, he can't communicate, which would make any accident default to being his fault. So what I do with my son is we go to an empty parking lot on a early weekend morning, and he gets to drive around a parking lot. Or we'll find a track where he can drive go-karts and try to fulfill that for him as much as possible. But I also don't want to tell him, yes, someday you'll drive a car on public roads. Maybe someday we'll have a farm and you can drive around the farm. But I don't want to tell him something that's unrealistic and not true. And I guess one pivot to make there in terms of uh, what I just described, which were goals for Nicholas, what Nicholas wanted as goals for himself. One thing and I think others with children with intellectual disabilities struggle with is differentiating between goals and recognizing you're living your life now. That is, when you're striving towards some goals for someday, that someday is important and planning has value. But
Yeah.
these days today are just as important in those days as those days to come, and to some extent more important because you're living your life right now. You'll always be living your life right now. And so centering joy and community and friendship and connection and whatever well-being looks like for the individual you're giving care to today is always the most important thing.
Yeah. No, that's perfectly stated. And you're exactly right. When we talk about shared decision making, and when we've talked about it here in the group, it's really in that framework of, as a caregiver, being able to lay out the practicality, the logistics, okay, well, what's achievable? Um, you know, uh, when it could be something as simple as, let's look at what medications or therapies may be available to treat X, Y, or Z. But if your loved one has difficulty swallowing pills,
Mm.
even if that is, maybe that option one, you may have to explore what those other options may be, or figure out, all right, well, how do we do a pill so that it's more feasible? Like you were saying, we go to the parking lot. Um, so I really love that you kind of put that together in that way. Um, a question, and you kind of touched on this. What what has been one of the most unique aspects of kind of your care journey um, in supporting Nicholas?
I think something that differentiates me a little bit from some parents of autistic children specifically, or maybe intellectually disabled children as well, is that there was always acceptance right from the start. There was never a grieving process. I never grieved. You know, this was my son. This is who he is. The diagnosis just gave information that helped me better support him in his well-being in his life. That doesn't mean the diagnosis doesn't carry challenges for him in his life, and some associated with that for me and mine. But you know, for me, my son is only a blessing, and it's always been that. So sometimes when I speak to groups or to families or to students, I have to make sure I'm careful about that because I do recognize that many people experience grief. I can work to shift that. I can, you know, what you're grieving is someone who doesn't exist. You know, that autism isn't a thing, for example. Let's use the autism. Autism isn't a thing that this child's been afflicted with. Autism is a description of characteristics of the child. You can change the characteristics and you would change the population that's called autistic. It's just a name. And so now knowing Nicholas, my son's name is Nicholas, Nicholas is autistic, gives me information about what supports autistic people. It lets me ask autistic people about their own experiences, so they're able to share that, and lets me be strategic about how I can best support my son in his life. But I've never regretted anything about my son. I love my son exactly how he is. If there's a button, a magic button to take away his autism, I wouldn't push it. I think earlier in his life, he would have pushed it. I don't think he would anymore, and I think that's a celebration of his bravery and his smart choices and his kindness and goodness, and increasingly over the arc of his life, his increased level of self-acceptance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really gets into maybe a completely different conversation about, when you are supporting a child with significant healthcare needs or someone that's born with a disability or chronic condition versus someone who you're supporting through a cancer diagnosis, or other kind of conditions or ailments that may occur as someone is aging. Um, I think that we begin to look at those things as being a part of the person, and that's just who they are. Um, I
Yeah, Nicole, I appreciate that. Thank you, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think there's something that carries over through everything, which is acceptance of reality, accepting the reality of what is. That doesn't mean you're not working to change things or make things better or make things or support the person in his, her, or their life in better ways. But when we spend our time torturing ourselves about what is and wishing it were otherwise, we're not doing a service to ourselves and our well-being, but we're also not doing our best job of caring for that other person. We're not being fully present for that other person because we're thinking about what else could be, or why this happened, or why her or him or us, as opposed to just living the best life we can, and supporting the person for their well-being and their happiness as best we can. And so I think that carries forward to any situation, to striving to do our best for one another. That doesn't mean some things aren't hard. It's not even what I said earlier about other people grieving. That's not to judge them. It is to say that the longer you spend grieving, you're taking away from the life you're having, both for yourself and for the person you're giving care to.
Yeah, that's, I think, a really, I think, powerful way to frame that. And something that's relatable, like you said, across, kind of all care situations across a lifespan. How important has finding and connecting with other parents been for you over the years? Is that something that you started um, early on? Um, or is it something that, well, just what was that experience like for you?
I think community has always been very important. The more community connection we have, the more strength we feel as caregivers, um, the more we learn lessons that we can
Yeah.
share with one another. and the more we create community for our loved one as well. So a few things. In North Carolina, I live in Western North Carolina, and we had an organization called Family Support Network of Western North Carolina, and I was on their advisory council. I was chair of their advisory council, pardon me, for about a dozen years. And we had a very robust community of families that would come in. There would be childcare. There would be either a talk by someone or a small group breaking into small groups and sharing stories and getting support from one another. And that was, I think, really valuable and a real asset to many families, including mine, for a long time. As Nicholas has gotten older and reached adulthood, and as support for organizations in North Carolina have diminished. So that organization still exists, but in as a fraction of what it was. It's not the same organization. And that's not to speak ill of that one. It's to say a lot of the organizations are far reduced from when my son was a child, which is astonishing. We're moving in the wrong direction sometimes, but then getting different kind of community, for example, online communities like this one, that can offer support and connection. But it is different, right? There are pluses and minuses to different things. Access to it is a wonderful, beautiful thing, but that in-person dynamic can also really matter. And they're not mutually exclusive, of course. They both can happen. But as that has reduced generally in North Carolina anyway, maybe nationally, because there's been support for children with intellectual and developmental disabilities has been moving in the wrong direction across different administrations too. It's hard to get the support we need and the funding we need to have robust family support. So as Nicholas turned to adulthood, we created a support circle for him to help develop community. So friends, people he's known for a long time, former teachers, former camp counselors, connected in different ways and create community around that, a support circle that meets regularly, that people can have a shared calendar and can find out what my son is up to, what Nicholas is up to, and offer to help. I think I think that can benefit anyone, actually. Of course, sometimes people are very isolated and feel very isolated, and starting to take first steps to other people for visits, for care, for helping step in sometimes, for if the person's is mobile, for doing things and taking the person to dinner, or inviting them for a Friday night dinner, or to taking them to a movie, or whatever that would be. And that benefits everyone, of course. It helps the individual feel like they're cared for, about not just by a one family member or several family members, but beyond that, right? It opens up the world. And for caregivers too, uh, you're seeing connection for your loved one in a way that you won't see otherwise, right? There's also a release of ownership then. That is, sometimes as caregivers, we feel ownership of the well-being of that person. It's all on us. And it's not. No one's, everyone in the world can have bad things happen to them at any time, or good things happen to them at any time. It's beyond our control, a lot of life. It's just our lives. We can't control every aspect of it. It comes up when we do planning for after we die. We can plan anything we want. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. Because life happens, will happen to this loved one that we're caring for in the same way it happens to us, where something can happen to us at any time as well, or things might go in an unexpected direction, or things might change contextually. So building a support circle around someone, the more you can do that, I think the better, because it protects from that, it insulates from that, and it adds quality, it adds meaning, it adds depth, it adds diversity to people's lives.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a important point, which is, there's no such thing as kind of like the predictable caregiving journey. There's always stops along the way that are detours that are unexpected, that our loved one's condition can change. Their support needs will change over time.
Mhm.
And to be able to, we're not always able to anticipate and plan for those changes. We have to be able to adapt and just kind of figure out what that next step can be. Um, so I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I do think that's something that, again, um, you know, all caregivers, I think, experience um, to one degree or another. And I really love what you said about building that community because you're exactly right. It is something that is so important for all caregivers. I think building that care team that can come in and, provide respite when you need a break. Maybe there's a friend, maybe there's other family that can come in and assist, so that you can have a break, or whatever that may look like for your specific kind of care situation. Um, but also just building up as a caregiver your own support network, those people that you can reach out to and share, and say, like, today was rough. Um, you know, this is what's going on, and having someone that you can communicate with and that understands it, because a lot of times it may not be a family member or friend that we can feel comfortable sharing some of those things with.
And being able to ask for help. I think that's something many caregivers struggle with. Being able not just to make that call and say, hey, it was a rough day, I need someone to talk to, but hey, can you come over tomorrow and do this? Or whatever this is that you need. And building up a network of that, which asks a lot of us, actually. It asks us to be humble that someone else can do some of what we do. It asks us to sometimes, but also it's a gift. Like people like being asked to help often. I do. When someone needs something and I can step in and give some help and assistance, like that is meaning for me. It helps me. So just kind of reframing that sometimes for caregivers, I think is hard, but can be really valuable and can enhance not just your own life, but the life of the one you're caring for. Give them more diversity of experience, more connection, different things. My son and I want to make sure when we talk about caregiving, we mentioned that there are professional caregivers, of course, care
Oh, yeah.
workers, direct care workers, or in North Carolina, they're called direct support professionals. I mentioned my son has an innovations waiver, so he has some direct support professionals. And the diversity of who has been his direct support professionals over a lot of years, and also how much they've meant to him, how close those relationships have been. And I know there's all sorts of professional uh, structure around making sure it's not too close. But when you're spending time with someone every day or a lot of days a week, you develop relationship in the way you would with a colleague at work, or that's a very natural thing to do. And I think direct care workers and direct support professionals who generally are under paid in the United States and definitely in North Carolina, are just some of the best people in the world. But also, each one brings their own uniqueness. And so my son does things in community that he would never do with me. And that's a beautiful thing, right? His experience of life is actually much richer and broader than mine is because of that. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate the shout out to those paid supports, because they are so integral, for so many. And, they are an absolute foundational piece to a care team, so often. And I also appreciate what you said about asking for help, because you're spot on. It's one of the most challenging things that we can do as caregivers, because I think there's a, a thinking that as caregivers, if we have to ask for help, we're letting our loved one down,
Mm.
because we're not able to be there and do X, Y, or Z, whatever that task may be, or whatever that looks like in your care scenario. But that's not the case, because oftentimes asking for that help makes sure that your loved one is getting all of the supports that they need, but you're also getting that support. And so everyone is kind of being lifted up, so that you can continue to go the distance.
There's a release of control with it as well. Of course, people are in different caregiving situations. I want to be very respectful of that. But for my son, For a long time, for most of his life, I've been the hub of his wheel, and everything that's designed for him kind of revolves around me. And the goal has been to shift that. So Nicholas is the hub of his own wheel, and I'm a spoke in the wheel. And it has lots of spokes. And, one of those spokes might break off, and it might be me, but the wheel still works then. Well, if I'm the hub of the wheel, then the wheel doesn't work when I'm gone. And that's doing a disservice to him. It's maintaining control. And control sometimes feels good. I like to set things up the way I want to set things up for
Yeah,
him. But there's a lot of wisdom with other people and other perspectives, other experiences, other ideas that just enriches life.
100%. I love that so much that your loved one is the hub of the wheel, and you're that's such a perfect way to frame it because yes, especially if you are caring for someone where that caregiving is going to take place over a long duration of time, you do have to build that infrastructure, um, so that, yeah, whether you're able to be there to do that level of care or it's something else, that your loved one has the ability to kind of be at the center of that and kind of be where that originates from. So I really appreciate you, I think, framing it that way. I think that's something that um, really rings true. Um, to kind of close things out, I guess my last question is, what is one piece of advice or one thing that you would want to share with a caregiver who is maybe at the very beginning um, of that caregiving journey? What is something that you've learned, a piece of advice, something you wish you would have known at the beginning that you would want to share?
I think there are several faces to it. So let's see if I can give it a language. Um, I think someone might feel some burden or challenge around it, but there's also opportunity and blessing. Someone might feel really isolated, but there's also the opportunity then to become more connected, both for you and for your loved one, but then also in community and do some advocacy for people like your loved one. For me, that looked like uh, being on the boards of local organizations and then doing some local advocacy and then doing state level advocacy around policy and then even doing some federal advocacy at the national level, which is why I have a relationship with the Arc of the United States, who I think suggested this connection. And I'm grateful to them for it. My son and my son, who's autistic and intellectually disabled, were at an executive order signing in the Rose Garden with President Biden around caregiving. It was caregiving executive order, quite extensive executive order. And he went to the White House 3 times for other things as well. And so it wasn't just me doing that kind of advocacy work, it was my son too. And that kind of meaning, helping others, I don't think we immediately go there. We feel all this stuff happening to us, but sometimes that helps lift us up. And it's not that we need purpose when we're caring for someone, but it adds to it enriches the purpose or the perspective of purpose. So I think then we don't become lonely at all. We become purposeful to help not just the one we care for and not just make our own situation better, but to make those situations better for those in like situations. Whether that's immediately like autism within autism, for me more broadly to intellectual disability, then more broadly again to disability, then more broadly again to caregiving. So these are circles that happen locally, they happen at the state level or the regional level, and they happen at the national level too. And that's a lot of people you can be connected with, and a lot of people you can help lift up. One other thing I did was I really wrote, I think a lot of caregivers write. And when I wrote, I tried to really take on the perspective, my son was still a child, of autistic adults. It was autism specific at that point, less intellectual disability and more autism at that point. And so really learn about the perspectives of people in the population who have things to share that I might not think of myself, and then help bring that back to parents and family caregivers. It doesn't mean we have to say yes to everything, but it means we should know what those perspectives are, the perspectives of the population, and respect them. And I think starting off for many parents for autistic children, you mentioned it's Autism Acceptance Month. Well, that used to be called Autism Awareness Month, and autistic advocates, adult autistics who are active, shifted it to acceptance because they say, well, everyone knows about autism now. People don't need to be aware of it. What they need to be is accepting and to help with inclusion and help with, and that's all true. However, I truly believe people don't know enough about autism that awareness still matters. Um, and so one thing to be aware of when people get a diagnosis, they are still grieving that information unless they have real experience with autism previously. Either they're autistic or a family member is, and they're not less taken aback because they're familiar with the community. If they're not, people still grieve that diagnosis, and it's because they don't really understand it. And when they start in places that are using a traditional medical model of autism and a feeling of loss and diagnosis and loss, and you're then grieving the life that isn't going to happen. It's a different life than what you anticipated. But if you listen to autistic adults, if you learn about it in a richer way, a broader way, you can find all sorts of possibility for that person, that child, in this case, having a beautiful, wonderful life. So opening up ourselves to the possibilities that even when things are hard, they can get better for our loved one and for ourselves, and we can support others as well and give us meaning in doing so.
That's, I cannot imagine a better way to close things out because absolutely, I think you have really given just a wonderful, I think, wide array, a wide range of different experiences and perspectives here for folks that, you know, wherever they may fall, whatever level they may be at, whether it is someone who's caring for an individual with an autism diagnosis or an intellectual or developmental disability or disability, you kind of walk through that. I think that that's something that is, I think you've given us all so much to just kind of like sit with because, um, that's why we do this. We want folks to be able to share, and impart their wisdom to us so that we can continue to understand, how we can be there for each other as caregivers too. Understanding that everyone's coming to the table with different needs, different support needs, living a different day-to-day experience, and how can we show up for each other. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm so delighted that we got connected. Uh, this has just been a fantastic conversation. One of the things I'll make sure to do in the comments is to add a link to your website where you have an amazing blog, which I think tackles quite a bit of what we've talked about here in various ways, but is so much more as well. So I'll definitely be sharing that. But thank you so much, Ray. This has been an absolute delight to talk to you.
And for me as well, Nicole, and I want to thank you for this good work you're doing, creating exactly the kind of community we were talking about. People supporting one another, lifting one another up, and giving each other ideas, and building connection.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ray. Folks, I hope that you really enjoyed this conversation. Please sound off in the comments. Leave questions. If you have them, share experiences. That's what we're all here for. Like I said, I'll be sharing a link to Ray's website with his blog. But if you have resources that you also want to share, I know that you mentioned the ARC. I'll definitely add that in there as well. But yeah, let's share. So thank you so much, Ray. Please know that you always have an open door to come back anytime. This has been wonderful, and thank you for your time.
Fabulous, Nicole. Thank you so much. Take good
Thank
care.
you, Ray.